Netflix's One Piece live action is, by pretty much every measure you can think of, a global phenomenon. I mean, it's a record-breaking, critically acclaimed smash hit that finally broke the curse of terrible anime adaptations. But here's the thing. Underneath all that shiny mainstream success, a really fierce debate is raging. And it's not coming from critics or, casual viewers. It's coming from inside the heart of the fandom itself, the very community that has loved and supported this story for over 25 years. Now, this isn't just some minor disagreement over casting choices or costumes. No, this is a fundamental conflict, a fan's civil war that really forces us to ask a tough question. What does it truly mean to successfully adapt a story that people love so much? To really get what's going on, we have to break down the two opposing sides. So at the very heart of this whole conflict is a challenge that comes up with any adaptation. This happens literally every time a story moves from one medium to another, from a book to a movie, or in this case, from a Japanese comic called a manga to a global live-action TV show. The people making the new version, they have to make some tough choices about what to keep, what to change, and what to cut out completely. And you can bet that every single one of those choices gets put under a microscope by the people who know the original story by heart. And for a story as huge and as detailed as One Piece, which has over 1,000 chapters of material, well, that pressure is just on a whole other level. This entire war really boils down to two opposing camps, two totally different ways of thinking. We have the purists and we have the pragmatists. Okay, so let's start with the purists. For them, the original manga created by Ichiro Oda is basically sacred text. They believe that every single panel, every line of dialogue, every character that seems minor, it was all put there for a reason, and it all contributes to this massive interconnected story. So, to put it another way, they see the original source material as a perfect, finished product, and to change anything is to disrespect that original vision, and you risk unraveling the whole thing. Imagine a world-famous painting, right, like the Mona Lisa. A purist would argue you can't just decide, hey, let's change the color of her dress, or let's take that tree out of the background, because Leonardo da Vinci put every single brushstroke exactly where he wanted it. Any change, no matter how small you think it is, takes away from the masterpiece. Now, on the other side, you've got the pragmatists. These fans get that different forms of media have different rules, and, maybe more importantly, different limitations. They argue that changes aren't just okay, they're absolutely necessary. I mean, what works perfectly on the static page of a comic book, like crazy character designs or these totally over-the-top fights, that might not translate well to a live-action show with real actors, physical sets, and a very, very real budget. So the goal for a pragmatist isn't a one-to-one copy of the original. What they want is for the show to capture the spirit and the essence of the story for a brand new global audience. Think of it like this. An architect is given a beautiful, imaginative drawing of a house. The architect's job is to turn that drawing into a real, functional building. They have to think about real-world stuff like gravity, the cost of materials, and building codes. The final house, it might not look exactly like the drawing, but it's a real structure people can live in, and it captures the soul of that original design. That's what pragmatists are looking for. And this is the core of the pragmatist argument voiced perfectly by a fan right here. They're pointing to the cold, hard realities of making television. I mean, a massive show like One Piece has a super strict schedule to meet, a limited runtime for each episode, usually less than an hour, and a budget that, while big, is not infinite. Every single minute of screen time, every special effect, every location shoot, it all costs a lot of money. So what this fan is saying is that when we see changes like storylines getting shortened or events simplified, it's not always because the writers thought they had a better idea. A lot of the time, those are practical decisions just to get the show finished on time and on budget. But then, here's the perfect counterpoint. And what's so interesting is that it comes from the exact same fan. This really highlights the central fear of the purists. The issue for them isn't the idea of change itself, it's the consequences of those changes. They're worried that in the rush to save money and time, the creators are cutting out crucial pieces of the story's foundation. And that creates what we call plot holes. Gaps or inconsistencies in the story that just break its internal logic. For example, imagine a story where a character needs a specific key to open a treasure chest. Now, if the show cuts the scene where the character finds that key just to save 2 minutes of screen time, the audience is going to be totally confused later on when that character magically pulls the key out of their pocket. The purists argue these so-called practical changes aren't just simplifying the story, they're actually creating a weaker, less logical one. So this battle between being faithful and being practical isn't just some abstract theory. It has real, tangible consequences for the show. This conflict between fidelity, which just means staying true to the source, and the practical demands of production, it shows up in very specific ways right there on the screen. So let's look at a perfect example that basically split the fan community right down the middle. Yes, you heard me right. A duck. For those of you who are totally new to the world of One Piece, there's a really important character in the early parts of the story named Princess Vivi. And in the original manga and anime, she has this loyal, constant companion, a giant, kind of goofy, but incredibly brave super duck named Karoo. He's treated as a full-fledged member of the crew during a huge storyline. But in the live-action show, Karoo is just gone. He was completely written out of the show, and this one decision perfectly captures the entire fan debate. Now, what's really interesting here is how clearly this fan lays out the pragmatist defense for cutting the duck. From a production standpoint, this choice makes a ton of sense. First, as they argue, he's a supporting character, not one of the main ones. But second, and this is the big one, bringing a giant rideable duck to life in a realistic way would require a massive amount of CGI, or computer-generated imagery. CGI is the visual effects tech used to create anything you can't just film in reality, like dragons or fantasy creatures, and it is incredibly expensive. This fan points out that the show already had to dedicate a huge chunk of its effects budget to another non-human character, a talking reindeer-human hybrid named Tony Chopper. Think of it like this. You're planning a big party with a limited budget. If you spend most of your money on a spectacular, multi-tiered cake, that's Chopper, you just might not have enough left over for an equally expensive fireworks display, and that's Karoo. The producers had to pick one, and they chose the character they felt was more important to the overall story. But here's the purest rebuttal. This is the narrative cost of that financial decision. As this analysis points out, Karoo wasn't just some cute animal sidekick. He actually played an active, functional role in the plot. In the manga, he is a key player in a really unique fight against a villain named Miss Goldenweek, whose special power involves using colors and painting to control people's emotions. Karoo's involvement is a huge part of how the heroes actually win that battle. So by removing him completely, the show's writers had to rewrite that entire sequence. And for a lot of purists, the new version just felt rushed, illogical, and frankly, nonsensical. So here's the bottom line. The pragmatists see a smart budgetary cut that saved money for more important things. The purists see a decision that created a plot hole and weakened the story, all to save a few bucks on a CGI duck. Okay, so this brings us to the single most powerful and probably the most controversial argument in this entire fan civil war. It is the ultimate trump card that gets played in almost every single debate, and it all revolves around one man, the original creator of One Piece, Eiichiro Oda. This is the argument you'll hear most often from people defending the show's changes. It's often called the Oda defense, and the claim is that Eiichiro Oda himself wasn't just aware of what was happening, he was an active participant with a lot of creative control. He reportedly had the final say on casting, and he served as an executive producer and a consultant for the series. So the logic that follows is pretty simple and really powerful. If Oda, the guy who created this entire universe, approved these changes, then who is any fan to question them? From this point of view, any criticism of the live-action show isn't just a criticism of Netflix or the writers. It's a direct criticism of Oda's own judgment. It's basically an attempt to shut down the debate by appealing to the highest possible authority. And this viewpoint is backed up by real-world evidence. As this fan correctly points out, Oda himself described his role in a public interview with the New York Times. And he didn't say he was just a passive advisor. He specifically said he acted as a watchdog. That word is key here. A watchdog is a guardian, right? Someone who actively protects something valuable. The implication is that Oda was there to guard the spirit and integrity of his story, making sure that any adjustments for live action were done correctly and with his explicit blessing. For a lot of fans, that's the end of the discussion. Case closed.
But then comes the swift and cynical counter-argument. This fan represents a big part of the community who thinks the Oda defense is, as they put it, naive. They argue that we can't forget the context here. This is a multi-million-dollar Netflix production. Netflix is a massive corporation driven by capitalism, and its number one goal is to maximize profits for its shareholders. So while Oda's input is valuable for marketing and quality control, this side argues that at the end of the day, financial decisions made by executives will always come before the creative wishes of a single artist, even if he is the original creator. They argue that the smell of capitalism means compromise is inevitable, and money will always win out over creative purity.
And there's another practical layer to this skepticism. See, Ichiro Oda is famous for his relentless, all-consuming work ethic. For over 25 years, he has been writing and drawing new chapters of the One Piece manga almost every single week, a process that takes up nearly all of his time. So this fan poses a very logical question. How could one man, who's already working one of the most demanding jobs in the entire entertainment industry, possibly have the time to completely oversee every single decision on a massive TV production being filmed on another continent? They argue that sure, Oda might have approved the major story beats or the main cast, but it's just logistically impossible for him to have micromanaged every line of dialogue or every tiny change to a scene. So they argue that using Oda's name to defend every single little change is a pointless gesture. Kind of like throwing salt in the sea. All right, so we've covered the big picture debates about adaptation philosophy, budgets, and the creator's role. Now let's zoom in on the arguments that get the most personal and heated. The changes made to the main characters themselves, the Straw Hat Pirates. Let's kick things off with the crew's iconic swordsman, Roro no Zoro. In the original story, he's known for being this incredibly cool, powerful fighter, but he also has a really funny, goofy side. He has a famously terrible sense of direction and gets lost all the time, and he has this hilarious brotherly rivalry with the ship's cook, Sanji. The main complaint from a lot of purists is that the live-action version kept all the coolness but lost all the fun, giving us a character who was serious and brooding pretty much 24/7. Now, to really get this critique, we need to talk about something called a time skip. In a super long-running story like One Piece, a time skip is basically a storytelling tool where the plot suddenly jumps forward in time, often by a few years. It's like hitting a fast-forward button. One chapter, the characters are young, the next, they're older, more experienced, and often way more serious after everything they've been through. So this fan argues that the live-action show gave us post-time skip Zoro, the older, more somber version of the character from much later in the manga. They missed the younger, more lighthearted, funny swordsman from the early days. And this critique is even backed up by the actor himself, Makenyu, who mentioned in interviews that he naturally smiles a lot, but was specifically directed by the producers to be more serious for the role. And here we see the pragmatist defense, and it's really rooted in realism. This fan argues that you have to consider Zoro's backstory within the context of a live-action show. He's a professional bounty hunter. I mean, he has literally killed people for a living. In a more grounded, realistic setting, does it really make sense for a guy with that kind of past to be constantly cracking jokes and acting goofy? The argument is that a more serious and reserved personality is a logical, believable choice for the character in this new medium. So the key point here is that the problem isn't the show. The problem is the purest expectation that the live-action version has to be a perfect one-to-one replica of the comic, which they see as an impossible and totally unreasonable standard. But if the debate around Zoro's seriousness was a heated discussion, the next point was, for many purists, an unforgivable sin. It's all about a single scene, a single decision that they feel fundamentally betrayed the core identity of two of the main characters. Let's just break this down. The crew's captain, Monkey D. Luffy, and his first mate, Zoro, are the two strongest fighters on the ship. Their defining traits are just immense courage and an unwavering drive to protect their friends and innocent people. In a key scene in the live-action show, they run into a relatively weak villain named Mr. Five. Instead of fighting him, they make the decision to run away, which allows another character to stay behind and sacrifice himself so they can escape. For purists, this was jaw-dropping. It felt completely out of character. In the original manga, this exact same confrontation happens, and Luffy and Zoro defeat this villain effortlessly with a single punch. The idea that they would ever run from such a weak opponent and let a friend take the fall was just unthinkable. And this just brilliantly illustrates why that one change matters so much to fans. It's not just about a single scene. It's about the integrity of the character's entire journey over hundreds and hundreds of chapters. As this fan explains in the original story, there is a very famous, very important moment that marks the first time the Straw Hat crew is ever forced to run from a fight. It happens much, much later when they come face to face with an impossibly powerful enemy, an admiral named Kizaru. That moment is devastating. It's the point where they realize their courage isn't enough, that there are enemies they just can't beat yet. It forces them to get stronger and marks a critical point of their maturation. So by having them run away from a nobody like Mr. Five early on, the live-action show, in the eyes of purists, completely robs that future crucial moment of all of its power and significance. It fundamentally ruins a cornerstone of their character arcs. So, all of these passionate arguments, about budgets and CGI ducks, about the creator's real level of involvement, about a swordsman's smile and a captain's courage. They all spiral out into a much bigger, more complex question. If the show is a massive success with the general public and with critics, but it causes these deep, fundamental disagreements among its most dedicated fans, then what does success for an adaptation really truly mean? These are the central questions right at the heart of this war. And you know what? They apply to every adaptation ever made. Let's break them down. First, who is this show really for? Is it meant to please the old fans who've been here for decades? Or is its main job to bring in millions of new viewers who've never even heard of it? It's incredibly difficult to do both perfectly. Second, does mainstream success automatically make an adaptation good? If 100 million people watch and love the show, does that just cancel out the detailed, well-reasoned criticisms from die-hard fans who know the source material inside and out? Then there's the question of the spirit versus the letter. The show absolutely captures the adventurous, optimistic spirit of One Piece, but it changes a lot of specific details, the letter of the original text. Is capturing the feeling of the story enough, even if the events themselves are different? And finally, where do you draw the line? I mean, everyone agrees some changes are necessary, but when does a change stop being necessary and start actively damaging the story? Cutting a duck might be on one side of that line for some people. Making heroes act out of character? That might be on the other. Everyone draws that line in a different place, and that's why this war just keeps going. And this is the provocative question we're left with. By all commercial and critical metrics, the One Piece live action is a masterpiece of adaptation. It succeeded where so many others have failed. But if a significant part of the fan base, the people who kept the flame alive for a quarter of a century, feel that it is a compromised, flawed version of the story they love, how do we square those two realities? So to slowly summarize everything we've unpacked today, the live-action One Piece is a huge hit, but it's also created a deep divide among its most loyal fans. This split is between two main groups: the purists, who want a perfect one-to-one replica of the original manga, and the pragmatists, who accept that changes are necessary when you adapt a story to a new medium like live-action TV. We saw this conflict in action with the specific example of Karu the duck being removed from the story. For pragmatists, this was a smart budget cut to save money on expensive CGI. For purists, this cut created plot holes and weakened the story. We then explored the Oda defense, which is the argument that the original creator's involvement validates all the changes. This was countered by the view that corporate interests and Oda's own packed schedule make his total creative control pretty much impossible. And finally, we looked at how these debates affect the characters themselves. We examined the complaints that the swordsman Zoro was portrayed as too serious, losing his comedic side. And we analyzed what many fans see as the most serious mistake: a scene where the heroes Luffy and Zoro run away from a weak enemy, which purists argue betrays their core identities and undermines a huge moment of character development down the road. There really are no easy answers here, and that ultimate question about what defines a true masterpiece is what ensures this fan civil war will probably continue for as long as the live-action ship continues to sail.
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end and see you in the next video.